Hi, this is Dave. So, let's have a look at the human resource management in this particular chapter. So, before we move any further, I'd like to talk to you about a little bit about the human resource management. So, what do I mean by human resource? Are just to be the human beings. So, we're going to manage those human beings within your organization in order for them to work for you, to make money for you. But the question is, how are we going to make sure that the employees within those companies are working for their shareholders to make money for those shareholders? Okay, so here's the question. The first question being, human resource, which means the employees within the company, will have to spend a lot of money into recruiting those employees and paying for them, so such as the reward, etc., etc. So that should we cheat those human resource as the expense, or should we cheat those human resource, which is the employees, as an asset for the company? What do you think? You can argue that it's an expense because we have to pay lots of things for them in order for them to work for us. But maybe you can argue that they are the assets for the organization, because we can use those human resources, which is the employees, to work for our company and generate into economic benefit to our company. So that's the asset for the company. Okay, so the modern view about the human resource management is where we're going to treat those employees within a company as an asset to a company, rather than just the cost burden for the organization. And hence, how are we going to manage those human resources are particularly important for the organizations nowadays. From the traditionalist point of view, the human resource department especially is going to deal with the recruitment and firing of the employees if you're not doing a good job. Also, we're going to pay the salary for you and jobs done. So that's from the traditionalist perspective. But from the modern view's perspective, how we're going to manage those human resources is particularly important for the organization. So let's start having a look at this particular chapter. So we're going to talk about the human resource management, or HRM for short. So when talking about the HRM, there are particularly 4 issues I'd like to talk to you about. So firstly, we're going to discuss from the modern view's perspective, what are the roles of the human resource department especially. Of course, I'm going to use a mnemonic here for the roles of the human resource department is I'm going to use phases. Yeah, we need to have phases so that those rows are called phases. So let's look at what are they then. So F, A, C, E and S. So the first row of the modern human resource department is called the facilitator row. This means that the human resource department is not only dealing with the recruitment as well as the firing of the employees within the organisation and pay for them salary, but also we are going to be responsible for the training to those employees. So a common example I like to talk to my student is about when your organisation is going to expand your businesses overseas. You're going to set up subsidiaries overseas. You need to have an accountant to deal with the foreign exchange risk. Okay, differences. Foreign exchange risk hedging. So you need to have that technique. As a result of that, you can talk to the human resource department. Can you find a particular expert for our department to deal with the forex risk changes? Well, maybe the human resource management department, human resource department is going to help you out in that particular issue. So that's the first row of the modern human resource department. The second row is what I mean by audit row. So, what do I mean by audit row is where the human resource department is particularly focusing on the policies within the organisation. So one of the examples I like to give my student is that in the manufacturing industry, manufacturing companies, they've got lots of these health and safety policies in there. So each of these departments, particularly for the production department, has to follow. Otherwise, maybe the product will get, damaged. Maybe the employees will get hurt if they're not going to stick to that policy. And hence the human resource department here is going to make sure that those of the departments are making sure those departments are complying with the policies that we've set for the organisation, okay, across the whole organisation. So that's the second row. The third row stands for consultancy row. So the consultancy row for the human resource department is to deal with the specific issues that may arise within the organisation. So for example, maybe within the one of the departments, so such as the marketing department, there will be two particular persons there, person A and person B, because we reward those marketing staff based upon their performance normally. So for example, if you can make a sales revenue of $10 million, I'm going to give you a bonus of 5%. But because of this bonus issue, that the person A and person B failed, that is not fair for them individually. So that they argue with each other, and then they trying to, screw at each other as well. How to solve this particular problem? Maybe you're going to raise this issue to the human resource department. They're trying to make sure that to see whether or not the reward I set to those employees within that marketing department is fair. If it is not fair, of course, I'm going to give you some of the ideas of how to set the fair bonuses or remuneration to those staff within that department as well. So that's the third row of the human resource department. The fourth row of the human resource department is the executive row. So, which means the human resource department is going to deal with some of the execution bits and pieces within the organisation. So for example, that the human resource department is going to deal with the succession planning within the organisation. So for example, who would be the next of our chairman within the organisation? Who would be the next marketing director within the organisation? So maybe this is hands-on to the issue to the human resource director within the board. So succession planning is what I mean by we're going to deal with who will be the next generator for the current position. Okay, so the next of our issue is that the human resource department is also dealing with the wages, going to set up how much we're going to pay for the employees within the organisation. Deal with the leadership management, making sure that the leaders within one particular department has sufficient capacity as well as competence to lead this particular department into success. Also deal with the organisational redesigns, making sure that the organisation is flexible, so for example. Because this is particularly important nowadays, because for example, if you are a startup company, of course, very much focusing on the executive board, which is the CEO within the company, because the startup company will face a lot of these changes daily. So they have to react to those changes quickly. So that we're going to focus upon the executive directors rather than following a series of procedures in place. So if you are manufacturing industry companies, for example, surely very, very much focus upon the procedures that you set up. Because you're making the standardized products daily. If you're not going to stick to that standard, surely your products is not good. So we are going to say whether or not your company has the correct or appropriate organizational structure. That will be very, very important for the organization. So we're going to allow the human resource department to deal with this particular issue. And finally, the human resource department will have the service role as well. So what do I mean by service role? Is that the human resource department is going to deal with the compliance issues. This means that, of course, we'll have to make sure that the company is complying strictly with the laws and regulations in their country. If this is not the case, for example, that the employees are not paid at a rate that is above the minimum wages set by the laws and regulations. For example, the laws says you have to pay at least $10 to the employee, but you actually pay $8 to the employee. So what happens is that the employee may sue you, and of course it will affect your reputation within your organisation. That's not good. So those are the roles of the human resource department. Okay, so that's on the left hand side. So once you've looked at the rows, it's called phases, yeah, on the left hand side. We now move on to how the human resource department actually performs daily within the organisation. Is what we're going to look at another terminology. It's called the human resource cycle, or HR cycle if you prefer. So it simply talks about that how the human resource departments may perform daily within the organisation. So I'm going to use a mnemonic as well for the human resource cycle. It's my own mnemonic. It's called RESITE. RESITE. So let's see what are the meanings for each of these characters in turn with regards to human resource cycles. So it's the RE, S, I, T, and E. So I'm going to move this I smaller. Okay. So let's say what are the meanings for each of these characters in turn. So first R is what I mean by recruitment. So what do I mean by recruitment is that you as the employee or potential employee to the company is looking for a job, so that you're going to say, well, I'd like to be an accountant, I want to be an auditor. So that you're going to send a CV or your curriculum vitae to that particular audit firm, for example. So it's up to the human resource department within that particular company or firm to see whether or not we should recruit you, we should employ you as the employee to a company. So receiving your CVs and trying to see whether or not you're competent, whether or not you're fulfilling my requirements, etc. That's the third stage, which is the recruitment. And once you pass the recruitment stage, we're going to move on to the next is what I mean by selection. So the simple idea behind the selection is that, for example, there are 10 employees who has handed in their CV to the company. But I've only got one particular job in my company, so I only select one out of these 10. That's what I mean by selection. The third stage, which is the induction stage. So what do I mean by induction stage? Is that after I've decided to recruit you as the employee to my company, I'm going to give you a welcome, a particular short introduction of our company to try to familiarize yourself of what is my company's all about. So for example, my company, here in my company, we are doing the online courses. We are doing the online accountancy courses to students from all around the world. So I'm going to give you a short introduction to our company what it's all about and what sort of things that you need to be aware of when working within the organisation. So that's what I mean by induction. And the next one is what I mean by training. Development, as well as appraisal. So, what do I mean by training? So, for example, you want to be an auditor, you work in an audit firm, no problem for that whatsoever. But maybe before you work as an auditor in that particular firm, you have no idea of what is audit. So I'm going to train you as the auditor. I'm going to give you lots of these working papers showing you how can you audit the non-current asset, how can you audit the cash balances within a company, how can you audit this and how can you audit that. So that's what I mean by training. And what do I mean by development is that not only I'm going to train you the specialised knowledge that you need to know, but also I like you to be a leader for our department. So what are the traits or what are the characteristics that the leader should have? So I'm going to develop yourself as the leader for our company. Okay? Also we're going to talk about the career development as well in later section later on. So after I train you and develop you within the organisation so that you're working as the employee to an organisation, so I have to see whether or not you're actually competent. So for example, you're the sales manager within our company. You promises to our shareholder that you will make $20 million of sales revenue during this year. But at the end of the year, when I received the results for the sales revenue, they're just to be $10 million rather than $20 million that you promised before. So that there's a gap between these two. Suggests that maybe you haven't done a good job. So that I'm going to appraise your job. If you have done a good job, I'm going to give you more bonuses, for example, more share options, for example. But since you haven't done a good job in this particular case, maybe I'm going to downgrade you as the sales staff rather than sales manager. So that's what I mean by appraisal. Okay. So finally, of course, we're going to look at E, is what I mean by the employee termination. So we're going to talk about a lot of forms of the employee termination in a later section. But just an overview of the employee termination is that maybe from a company's perspective, we think that you're not competent to work for a company anymore. As a result of that, of course, you're not competent anymore, so that you shouldn't work for a company. So I'm going to sack you. That's what I mean by employee termination. Okay. So those are the cycles of the human resource management, is what I mean by reside. As you can see, the mnemonics is what the human resource department actually does daily within the organisation. And of course, within each of these stages, within the human resource cycle, we are going to have a plan before we actually dip into anything further. So that the third thing we're going to talk about is the human resource plan for the organisation. So this plan will be included in each of these stages within the human resource cycle in turn. The plan, how we're going to set the plan, of course I have my own mnemonics as well, and this mnemonic is called GSAM. Okay. So first G stands for, so let me just write the character here, G S A M. So G stands for the gap analysis. So we have to identify the gap analysis. For example, for the recruitment and selection, we're going to identify the labour supply as well as the labour demand. So for example, we demand the labour is to be 5 employees we're going to recruit. but the supply is to be 10. We only need 5, but there's 10 outside. Of course, we're going to select those employees, yeah? We're going to select the employees maybe sticking to a higher standard. So for example, not only, because there's more supply than the demand, so you're applying for the job as the management accountant here. For example, because there's more supply than the demand, so that I'm going to increase my standard. For example, not only you need to get the ACCA qualification, but also you need to get the SIMA qualification as well in order to be successfully applied for this particular position. Okay, so that's why, by performing the gaps analysis, identifying the labour supply as well as the labour demand, we are going to say it was the gap between these two, and this will impact onto the actual plan within the recruitment as well as the selection process within the human resource cycle. And also, for example, if we're going to look at the training development as well as the appraisals, for example. So, you set up a company overseas in India. So, for example, you're based in UK, but you set up a company in India. So, when you are, trying to get the money from the India into your country, so your UK, of course, you're going to retranslate all those foreign currency into your home currency, which is the UK pound. And hence, you're going to deal with some of the forex risk hedging with regards to this particular currency you're going to receive for pay. So from this perspective then, there's a training need. There's a training need for your organization to deal with that hedging. So that, of course, by identifying that gap of your needs, you're going to identify who's going to provide you with those knowledge in order to hedge against that risk. We're going to determine an appropriate strategy of how to do that later on. Okay, so those are the plan with regards to each of these cycles in turn. Let's look at the second one, which is the S. So S stands for the strategy of the organization. So when we are setting up the plan, it's particularly important that you're going to focus upon the strategy. For example, here at APC, we want to be a market leader within the online accountancy courses field. That's our strategy. But we lack of lecturers here. So that from the human resource department's perspective, we are going to recruit those lecturers to provide the online courses in order to finally become a market leader into the online accountancy field. So, based upon the strategy, we're going to recruit the experts, lecturers, in order finally reach the strategy, reach the destination we want to be. That's what I mean by S. And A stands for a job analysis. For example, you like to recruit one particular auditor that is specializing in auditing the financial instruments rather than the simple PPE within the client's company. So you're going to recruit that experts, no problem for that whatsoever. So before you're doing that, of course, you're going to set out the job description to that particular applicant, saying to him or her that what you should do if you are the auditor within an audit firm. So we're going to analyze the job, providing him or her with the job descriptions, for example, in order for him or her to work for a company more efficiently. Of course, the M stands for we're going to monitor the changes continuously. Making sure that we're going to continuously analyze the gap analysis, which is the, for example, the supply as well as the demand. We're going to see where not our company is lack of employees. We need to recruit more in order to produce a product. So you're going to monitor that changes continuously, but making sure that you're focusing on the strategy that the company has. What does the company wants to be? That's the most important thing for the organisations nowadays. Okay, so those are the roles and cycle and plan of the human resource department, of how we're going to manage the human resources asset within the organisation. Of course, in the next of our section, we're going to be looking at the detailed bits and pieces with regard to each of these cycles in turn, to see what are the things included in each of these cycle and how we're going to deal with them in the real life as well.